Alright, in this video we're going to look to make a lyric video, and that is putting lyrics or words over top of audio, and as the audio plays and the lyrics show up, then the actual words show up visually, which is pretty cool. So let's actually get into that. So Adobe After Effects 2022, I'm going to start with a new composition, and I'm just going to call it that. I'm going to call it a lyric video. Always great to name our comps. And what I want to do now is give it some specific parameters if it's going to go on YouTube. So 1920 by 1080, that's great. Square pixels, perfect. 24 frame rate. And let's look at full resolution to start, but we're going to have to play around with this because if our computers are a little bit slower, or just the way After Effects works, we might have to change our resolution over time, which we could do that here. So we could see a better animation. So if there's any lag, we could change that. And I'm going to start this off at 1 minute. So let me just go to 1 minute, and if it goes longer, it goes longer. I definitely want you to have at least a minimum of a minute, but it might go longer than that. I've done a couple of these and they've definitely gone over a minute, just depending on that clip of a song that you choose. Now the background color for now, I'm just going to leave as is, and I'm good to go. So I'm just going to say, okay, great. So there's my comp, and I have everything ready to go. There's my composition there. What I'm going to do first, the very first thing, I'm going to give you some ideas on how to just at least start this. The first thing you need to do, get some audio. So I have my audio here that I've already chosen. One of my favorite songs of all time. And I'm just going to go to my links. So I already kind of have everything set up in my organized file folder. I have my AEP, so I'm going to put my project in there when I save it very soon. My final, I'm going to put in my final folder, and my links I already have. So I have some audio, I have some graphics I'm going to use, some textures, and I have some video. There's actually I'm going to use this video as a background, which I found as well. So what I'm going to start with, I'm going to actually just bring in the audio. So I'm just going to click and drag and bring it over top of my project panel, and it's going to show up here. And you know what, I'm just going to bring everything right now just to get it ready. It doesn't matter, then I could organize myself. I may or may not use both these textures, but I'm going to play around at least with one of them. So I'm just going to select that, select both of those, click and drag them in. And just to show you once again, you can click and drag, or of course you could double click in here, or you can just go to File and import file, and then you can go do the same thing, go to your desktop or wherever your file is, and go find it. There we go, video, and I'm just going to bring in that video, and that's it, another way to do it. So let's organize ourselves in the project panel first. Number one, comps. So I'm going to put all my comps in there right now. Perfect, that works. Then I'm going to make another one. I'm going to call it graphics, and guess what, I'm putting my graphics in there, both of my JPEGs, and I'm going to call another one, I'm going to call it video. And if I had more than one video, if I want to play around, whatever, I'm just going to put everything in there. And one more is going to be my audio. And there's my audio, perfect. I'm going to click and drag and bring that in there. Once again, if I want, I can color coordinate these and say, okay, my audios are always going to be red. I'm just going to go top to bottom, yellow, which it already is yellow, aqua, and of course pink. Okay, there we go. So it kind of organized, looks great. And if I just want to twirl all those down, I can just get them ready for, you know, drag and dropping anything. And the very first thing I'm going to drop in, of course, is my audio. So there's my audio. I drag it in. Now what can we do with our audio? Let's play around and see what we can do. Number one, I'm going to lower my volume, and you have to keep in mind you're going to want to pick a song that you either love or hate, because you're going to be listening to the song over and over and over again to try to time it properly. So hopefully you pick a song that works really, really well for you, that you can totally handle, and something you're really passionate about. So you know, keep in mind you're going to be working on it quite a bit. So number one that shows up, there's no visibility of an audio channel, of course, so it just shows up I could either mute it or turn it on, which is great. I could lock it if I need to lock it. I don't want to do anything to it, I could do that too. When I twirl it down, you're not going to see any of my normal transform options and animation options. I'm just going to click on audio. What do I see? Audio levels, well, that's different, and there's a stopwatch. So guess what, I can make the audio loud, I can make it quiet, so I could fade it in and fade it out. So there's some pretty cool stuff I could do there. And let's look at the waveform. Oh, there it shows up the waveform. Great. Another way to do that, if I shut that off, go back here, if I just press LL, and it shows up as well. So there's another way to quickly access my waveform. Now a couple ways to look at the waveform. Now we know waveforms are pretty great because they can kind of give us indications of where there might be some certain hits or pops or something that might be happening, a drum hit or a certain lyric that might show up, whatever it is. So what we could do first is if I hover over top of the bottom here, I could actually click and drag and bring it down, and guess what? They get bigger. So I could see a little bit better here, see some of the highs and lows, and maybe that'll give me a good indication of where some of those hits are that I need to put a word or a lyric or whatever the case is. So, and the other one I could do obviously is move my actual length, and now if I stretch it out, that's going to give me even more of an indication of where I need to be and whatever. So that could really help out. You could move it down here, or this top gray line with the blue, we can move that as well, and that also is the same way as moving this kind of spread there, so we could really focus on a certain area, kind of magnify that area and really spread it out, which is great for us to really fine tune if you need to. On some situations you might not need to do that. I'm just going to bring this back down to normal, but for now I'm going to keep this a little bit wider, a little bit taller, just so I could see where everything's going. Okay, so that looks pretty good right now, just to give me a sense of what I need to do. The thing I need to do, the most important thing about all of this really, is to sync my words with the lyrics, with the beat, with whatever you're kind of looking for. Now, to each their own. So whatever song you have, you might do something different. That's totally cool. You might have a rap song, and guess what? A rap song, a lot of words coming out really quickly. So you're probably not going to have the opportunity to just quickly throw a bunch of words in there and animate them in a certain way. You might not be able to do that. You might have to put them all up right away and maybe highlight them in a certain way as they get sung or as they get hit. But if you have a slower song where lyrics come up slowly, there's a lot more opportunity for different animations and different ways to do that. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to show you how you would want to set yourself up at least, and then you can start bringing in your words and all the different things you want to do. So let's set up our markers. So markers are a thing that we can use that'll help us see where everything is, and then we can just you move our CTI over to the marker and then put down our first word, put down our first syllable, put down our first line, whatever you want to do. So let's start that up. Number one, I do need to work with my audio. I do need to say, okay, I'm not going to use, what if your audio has this crazy long intro and then it gets to the lyrics, but you're already, a minute in. Well, we need to trim up our audio potentially, right? And obviously trim off our audio as well at the end, saying, no, I only want to go, verse chorus, or, I only want to get to the first verse because it's so long. Whatever it is, it all depends on the song you choose. Now, hey, if you want to go for it and do the whole song, kudos to you. It's going to take you a long time, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm just actually in this exercise, I'm just going to show one verse, but I'm going to do a lot with that verse to show you what you could do with all your verses and choruses and all those situations. So I'm just going to play it through. So with my CTI at the beginning, I'm just going to press the space bar, and let's give it a listen and see what we got here. So right away, I see there was a gap there. So I definitely probably want to get rid of this. Now, this is a very, slow going intro, beautiful intro, but it goes a little bit slower and then it picks up. So, I'm probably going to have to bring that down a little bit. I'm going to have to cut that off. So what can I do here? Let's move it a little bit further along and let's see where I can go. So I'm going to move it and I'm going to press play here. Okay, that's where that big kick comes in. Great, awesome. Now, you know what? It's getting a little bit towards the end. I'm already up to my minute. That's a little tricky. So what I can do, I'm going to actually grab my clip here. And as I hover over my clip, I have this option here to click and drag it. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to click and drag it this way. And notice that it's actually kind of taking away this audio that was here. But it's not moving it over this way. It's actually just cutting off that. It's still there. If I need to bring it back, I can bring it back. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut that audio. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to bring it back to where that first kind of kick hits in. Cool. That's good. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the audio. And you can kind of see this little, as I move it, you see these little bars here that I'm kind of grabbing it and moving it over. So I'm going to move it over. And I'm going to bring it back to the beginning. And bring that bar right to the 0, 0. And I'm going to kind of play it again. I'm going to bring it here. Say, oh, there's some lyrics there. Great. So where does he start singing? Where does Richard Ashcroft start singing? Where is it? Right there. Beautiful. So probably what I want to do, I might want to fade in the music so I don't have to worry too much about where exactly it's going to start. But what I will do, I probably do want to bring this over a little bit more because I want to get a little bit more of the lyrics and the words and everything. So I'm actually going to cut this even more. So let's bring this even more. I'm going to cut it. Okay, let's bring it right about here. And now I click on the actual whole layer and let's bring it back to the very beginning. Right there. And now let's see how that starts. Okay, not bad. So right at this point, right about here, the lyrics start. So you know what? I'm going to bring it in. Maybe I'm going to leave it here because I want to show you something too. You could actually potentially have a lead-in title as well if you want. You could bring a title and saying, yeah, this is the artist, this is the name of the song, here it is. So I could do that as well. So I'm actually going to leave it right here because it doesn't really matter how long the lyric video is and how long your project is. What matters is you at least cover 1 full minute, but you're probably going to go over that. So let's leave it at this. So let's start. I'm happy with this. Now there is a way, if you ever had to do this, there's a way to split the audio as well. So if I just want to click on my layer, I can go to edit and I can go to split layer, which is on a PC is Shift Command D, sorry, on a Mac is Shift Command D. I can just click on that and it splits the audio. So now I have an audio track here and I have the audio track here as well. I can press LL there and I can get that as well. But I don't want to do that. I'm just going to keep it all together. But forever, if there's some reason you have to split your audio track, there is that way to do that. Now, I'm happy with where it starts, where my first lyric is, all that. You have to be happy with the foundation of the lyric video to start, because once you start playing with it, you don't want to go back and change things up, because once we put our markers in, our markers are going to stay with the audio. If you start moving things around, you're gonna have to start all over again. So let's just start playing around and see. I'm gonna move over my magnification just a little bit, and I'm gonna see where those hit points are, where the start of certain lyrics are, and I'm going to add a marker. So let's look at that. So cuz, he starts off with the word cuz, and it's kind of right about there. So adding a marker, what can I do here? Now right now this audio layer is selected, so what I can do to add a marker, there's a couple different ways. I can Control 8 adds a marker. There's my first audio marker. Now the audio marker is actually on this layer. That's on the layer because the layer was selected. That's cool, that's good. But as I work with this, I'm probably going to want to put the actual marker on the this top gray part, because as I add layer and layer and layer and layer, you're going to add a lot of layers probably for lyrics and different textures and different things you want to do. That this is going to slowly go down and get buried and get buried and get buried. Now realistically, you could put your audio at the very top, and that's totally fine. You could bring your audio is going to be your top layer all the time. It doesn't interfere with any visuals. You could totally do that. Or you can keep your audio at the bottom, but you could put your markers on this top gray bar. Well, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to get rid of that marker there. I know that marker is there. I'm going to click off of the layer. If you have no layer selected, and I do the same thing, I'm going to press Control 8. Now look where that marker is. The marker is on the top comp part here of this gray bar. That's great. So now if I put more layers on top, it's always, that marker is always going to be there at the very top, so I can always see it. It won't get buried. It looks really, really good. Okay, now another way to add markers too is not only Control 8, but let's pretend I'm going to move this over a little bit. I'm going to press the asterisk or the multiplication on the number pad of my keyboard, and it does the same thing. Another way to do it, I can actually drag this one over here. This is actually a marker right here. So I could just click and drag and bring it over, and it's the same thing. And it shows it actually has a number 1 on there. Now, what can we do with the marker as well? There's a couple things we could do with the marker. If I hold down Command and hover over top, I could just get rid of it. Now, I don't want to do that. So Command click gets rid of it, turns into a little scissor, say get out of here. If I hold down Option, here's another kind of cool thing. Right now, my cursor you see is two double head arrow, left or right. I could just click and drag and move it around. That's great. If I want to, I could also hold down Option. If I hold down Option or Alt on a PC, I could actually click and drag, and look what it does. It splits it. It splits the marker, so that actually can kind of and give me more of an encompass of, you know, from here to here is this marker, or from here to here is this marker. But that's all I want to show right now is this marker right now. What else can we do with this marker? Let's right click. So there are some settings, but before I go, I can go to marker time. So this marker is here, but I want it to actually sync up with this CTI. I can go to the marker time, the marker time will move over to, the CTI will move over to my marker, which is great. Another thing I can do, I could delete the marker as I just mentioned, which you can right click and delete the marker. I could lock the marker, so make sure it does not move, which is important. Or settings. Let's look at the settings here. Number 1, I could move the marker specifically. I can add a comment. So this was the word cuz. Okay, I could label it. I could give it a color. Let's give it a color. All right, there we go. And okay, there we go. So now it has the word cause in it because that's the first word it's going to bring up, and I can play around with that. Now if I need to move it around, that's fine. Now this is not the set in stone. I can move this around, and even if my layer actually starts there, I bring in the word cause, I could actually move the word cause. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a mark that gives me an idea of where I want it to go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now moving forward, I'm going to add in a bunch of markers. And I'm just going to add the markers in per word because I'm only going to show one verse. So let's see how that goes. I'm going to try to do this a little bit quick. Okay, I've set up these markers for now. This is all I'm going to work with for this particular tutorial, but I'm going to do a lot with it. So what I can do now that this is all set up, I'm good to go. I could lock these if I want to lock these, but I'm just going to leave them for now. They're good to go. Now I could actually start playing around. I could start bringing in my words, my textures, my pictures, anything I want. So let's actually start doing that. Number one, I'm going to bring in this video. It's just any picture could be your background. You could have a flat background of a color, an image you illustrated, anything you want at all, something that makes sense to the audio, but it can be play around with whatever you want. So I'm just going to bring this in. And I just got lucky. It happens to be 1920 1080. I can go to my align panel. If you don't see the align panel, obviously you can go to your window and find any panel you want. And I'm just going to center. And there it is. It's right up top there. And now what I can do with this, obviously, I can lock it. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to leave it alone for now. I could add some effects to it later, whatever I want to do. It doesn't really matter. This is great. Now, the thing we notice here about this, though, it doesn't go all the way. It's only about 10 seconds. So what I can do with that, I could just duplicate that, Command D, and I'll move it over. And I have this option here to kind of just, even if it overlaps a little bit, doesn't really matter. You can't really tell too much if it was actually, because the video kind of loops itself anyways. It's very similar. Either way, I can keep doing that over and over and duplicate it, which is fine. So there's mine, and I'm just going to lock those for now. That's great. All right, so now what I want to do is let's start adding in our lyrics. Now this one, once again, it's kind of a slow moving, but there are some fast parts to the lyrics. Either way, I'm just going to bring in these lyrics and see what happens here. So I'm going to type them out. So I know that cause starts here. It does not matter where you start, how you do it. What does matter when when the word's in there, or if you want to do it by syllable, you can do it by syllable as well. If someone, like in this one, he says symphony. If I want to do a sim, then a fo, then a knee, I can totally do that. Or I can keep it as one word. It's entirely up to you how you want those lyrics to hit. And it actually has a vibe and feel which you feel might work well for your particular audio. So let's just play around with that. So let's bring in some, I'm done setting this up. I got my background ready. So let me actually bring in my text, and I'm just going to start typing out. Now, what you might want to do is actually go online, find the lyrics, copy and paste them, and bring them in. However, just copying and pasting them and bringing them in is not really going to help you too much, because you still might have to split them up. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do this one by one. I got my cause, there it is, and I'm just going to duplicate this, Command D, I'm going to bring it over. Okay, I'm done lining. I've typed out all my words. Right now, it doesn't matter how it looks. Makes no difference. What matters now is that I'm going to line them up with the actual markers, or with the audio. The markers are just there to help. I'm going to line them up with the audio. So I'm going to line up my layers with the visibility of my layer of when it shows up and when it disappears. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to start to do that. I'm going to do one, and then I'll show you the rest really quickly. So cause is right here. So what I want to do with this layer is, I see cause, that's where it is, and this is where it appears. I don't need it to appear here, this part of the song. I want it to appear right here, right when it starts. So I'm going to click and drag and bring this all the way over here. So now the word cause is, or cuz I should say, the way he says it, is that where it starts. That's where it appears. Perfect. So this is what I want to do now. So, because it's a, so let's find out where it's a is. So it happens pretty quickly. I didn't make that marker yet. So what I'm going to do, I'm not even going to make those markers, but I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut. With my CTI over here, I want to bring this layer and this layer over here, but there's a quicker way to do that. If I select both layers, or select any layer that I want to bring the beginning point all the way over here, I could hold down Option or Alt on a PC and hit the open bracket and it will automatically bring those, whatever layers I have selected, to the beginning of the CTI. It doesn't move it over, it just starts it there. It brings the beginning all the way over here. Now the other is true if I actually want to cut it off. Let's pretend, let's see where the actual next one starts. Okay, let's say the end is going to be right here. I'm going to add another marker here. And this is the end. I know that that's the end of my first verse, and this is where the second verse is going to come in. So I'm just going to leave that as my marker. I'm not even going to put anything down there. I know what that is, and you could obviously label them however you need to label them. So what I'm going to do here is all these layers, I'm actually going to select, and I'm going to say the end point is now going to be here. Well, here's a quick way to do that. Option, close bracket. It brings the end point of all those here. Great. So now I could obviously click and drag them manually and do it, but there's a nice way to do it. Option, open bracket for the beginning, option, close bracket for the end. So I'm going to do the same thing for these ones here. So now I know that bitter is here. So option, open bracket. I know that sweet is here. Select the layer. Option, open bracket. I know that symphony is here. Option, open. Oh, that was sweet. Sorry, sweet goes there. Symphony goes here. And that's life. I'm going to bring both of those layers right here. We'll see how we animate those. Those might be a little bit different. I might animate them together, or I might animate them separately as they come in. So there I go. Let's actually play it through and see how they line up, because I could always change them anytime I want. Okay, not bad. Now obviously we start to hear a little bit of weirdness kind of going on there. That's the RAM preview, trying to make sense of everything that's going on, trying to use up a lot of my resources on my computer. Let's bring down the quality to a third, maybe we bring it down to a quarter. Now yeah, the background doesn't look as good, the words don't look as good. That's okay, I could always change it up if I have to. Say I know I need to see a better resolution of it, and I'll see a little bit better, but right now I don't need to worry about that. Now as you saw, they were a little off. That's okay, I could always fix them. I could say, you know, because it's needs to be over a little bit more. That's okay, I could always work with that. I could fix it up as I go, but I should try to nail it sooner than later before I start animating everything in. Because right now, this is kind of animating everything in. There it is, that's the words, it's animated, that's good, but it's not really creating any motion, really. It's just kind of showing. So we do want to make some interesting effects here. So what I'm going to play with now that I have everything lined up, or pretty close to, I'm going to fine tune it as I go. I'm going to start playing around with actually animating things in, because this is where I'm at. This is what I need to do. Before I go any further, as I always do, I always forget, but you should always remember to do, I'm going to save this. So let's save it to that organized folder that we already have, lyric video, AEP, and you know, I'm going to name this properly. And that's it. That's good for now. AEP. Great. So I'm just going to save that. Perfect. So now it's been saved. Great. And now I could work with this, because you're going to be putting a lot of work into this, and you definitely don't want to lose anything. So let's start with what I can actually do if I want to. When I can see everything, at this point, I can actually start organizing what I want to lay out, what the actual final layout will actually look like. If I hover over where I could see everything, I'm going to actually start to lay it out. So here is a little bit of a trick. I'm going to, number one, I'm going to kind of select everything. That's locked, so I don't got to worry about selecting my layer. I'm going to select all these. Now here is a bit of a trick, because I want to scale everything up. Okay, let's scale it up. I'm going to grab this one and scale it. Oh, that's kind of weird, and it does scale it, which I want it to, but it scales it this way, which is interesting. Kind of throws it off a little bit, but that's okay. I'm still going to play around with how I want the words to show up, and I could definitely use my align layer. And see, remember how our anchor points are automatically on the bottom of our text frames? So what I can do, I can just hold down Command, double click on the the pan behind, or the anchor point tool, and now all of a sudden it's in the middle. And maybe I want to do that for all of them. And quite frankly, I'm sure there is a quicker way, but this is how I'm doing it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start playing around with how maybe potentially I want this to be laid out. And as I just click and drag and bring them over, maybe I'm going to do this up there, Maybe I'm going to put Symphony down here on its own. I'll play with those there. Maybe I want to uppercase. Maybe I want to change. I can change the text. I can change the text anytime I want. As long as they're set up where they need to be, that's totally fine. So let me start playing around with this a little bit. I could align these a little bit better. So I'm going to select all those and go to my Align panel again. And once again, Window Align if you don't have it open. And I'm just going to set them up there, and same with these. I'm going to click on those two, set them up there. Now, for some reason that's not working. It might be set up to composition. It might actually align it to the actual composition. So if I have composition selected and I said go to the bottom, it's going to align it to the composition. Well, I don't want that. I want to align to the selection, and that's going to help out. So Symphony's on its own here, great, and that's Life is going to be, say, down here somewhere. I'm still going to play around with this to fine tune it to make it work the way I want to make it work. So the one trick I want to show you is that if I want to position these, in a certain way, I could actually use the parent. Where's parent? Parent right here to actually move them together and to align them and scale them together. So if I have this one here and I see, you know what? I want all of these. I like the spacing. I like how it all works, but I want them all to move together. What I can do, I could actually parent any words or any object to another object. So meaning if I move this, these will move with it. If I scale this, these will scale with it. Let's try it out. So I'm going to make its and a parent to cause. So watch what happens. I'm going to click on, I'm going to select just its and a. I'm going to click on parent. I'm going to say, I'm going to use actually this pick whip. And the pick whip is just a way to click and drag and say, move them to, or make them parent to cause. Okay, good. So now if I move cause anywhere, it's an a move with it because they're a child or a link to parent, to the parent of cause, which is great. So I can move those around. Now if I scale this up, well, guess what? Those scale up proportionally as well. I'm holding down shift and make sure I do that. Okay, that's great. That works out really well. And if for some reason I say, you know, I just want to scale up its, well, it's independent on its own as well, because you're not moving cause, which is linked to its, and you're just moving this on its own, so you can still do that. However, if I want to change cause on its own, then I have to get rid of these. I could click on those and just say none. I could do an individual one and say its. I'm going to click on that and say, yes, make it to cause. Okay, now it's linked to cause, or I could just say none. So using the parent is a great way to animate things, but it's also a great way just to organize yourself too, which is really, really helpful. So let's start playing around with how I might, if you see this is backwards, that's okay. So I'll go, it's a bitter sweet. Now, you know what? I kind of like the way it's going, but I might need a little bit of help here. Maybe I need some guides to help me not go too far over, or maybe I just want to keep something somewhat symmetrical. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in my rulers, and we know we can bring in our rulers just like in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Command R or Control R, my rulers show up. Now there is an option here to see something as well. Choose grid and guide options. So what can we do? We could open up our title action safe. So if we were going to put this on a certain way, we would have to make sure it's almost like a safety, just like if we're doing print work, a safety, like don't go past this area. There's an action safe area where if you had an action scene or something happen, you don't want to go too far because it might get cut off. There's a title safe scene where you don't want to go too far because the title, so words, important information might get cut off. So these are actually great guides to help us, and I'm actually going to use them. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to click and drag my own guides in to help me with that, just to show you how to do that. So I'm going to click and drag just like we do in Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. I'm just going to click and drag. Now these are my guides. And remember, they shut off the exact same way. Command : you could toggle them on and off, which is a great way, which would also be view and guides, show the grid, show guides, snap to guides, lock guides, clear guides. So there's a lot of things you could do here. So I'm just going to keep them here as is. And what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to lay this out in a certain way. So, and I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. Okay, there I am. I'm pretty happy with that. I could always play around with it later on, but for now, this looks pretty good, so I could animate some things. Some things when you animate them, you're probably not going to be able to go back. Some things when you animate, you could always take it back and start again, which is totally cool. However, here we are we have majority of things lined up. You know what, let's fine tune it now. Let's get into it where we could fine tune it a little bit more. Let's open up that waveform. Maybe we could find a little bit more here. Let's expand it a little bit, which I did. Let's try to find our great hits where it's going to get us exactly where we want to be. All right, that looks good. Now, there is another way to do this where you could scrub over the audio and you hear the audio as you scrub over it. You're not actually playing the audio, you're just scrubbing the audio. And the way to do that is to hold down the command key or the control key on a PC and just scrub over. Now, the faster you go, the faster you hear it. In some situations, this might really help you out, especially if there's distinctive parts to it. It's kind of hard to hear, but it might actually assist you if you're working with a certain bit of audio. So hold on command and scrub over, and you can kind of find a spot that might help you out. But either way, I'm pretty happy with the way everything's linked up. I'm going to save it. And now what I could do, I can start animating. Now, what do I want to do to animate? I'm going to do some, maybe I'll play around. It's entirely up to you how you want to do this. This is the kind of fun part. So do I want to animate the letters in together, or the words in together? If I were to split up symphony, how do I do that? I'm not going to do that, but I can split up the syllables. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a little bit of a range selector with my Kazitsa. So I'm going to put these all together and let's just see how this goes. So now I could move these over. I could line these up to here. These really don't matter anymore. They could still benefit me. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to get rid of them. But I don't really necessarily need them anymore because I am going to utilize these as much, but they still will give me some good placement. So let's start with cuz it's, so I'm going to do a little bit of a range selector here. What I want to do, I'm going to select animate on the cause. And let's just see how this goes. So I'm going to animate, and I'm going to animate a blur. Let's do a little bit of a blur here. Okay, cool. So my blur shows up on my range selector. So animator 1 and my range selector 1, and blur shows up. And what I want to happen, I want it to be very blurry, then come into proper. So I'm just going to add what I should do here. So this is the key to create these kind of animations that work. I want to get to my first part of my word, which is right here, the first part of where it syncs up, where the layer begins. Perfect. What I want to do, I want to add a keyframe in. I'm going to add the keyframe in I want, the keyframe that I want to show up. Now this can still move, and that's totally great. But what I want that keyframe to say this is when the visibility will happen right here. So what I want to do, I want to bring actually the CTI prior to that one, because I want it to animate in to this particular keyframe, to this point in time. Now here's a quick way to do that. I'm going to show you a little trick. If I hold down command and I use my arrow key, so I'm holding on command or control on a PC, and I'm going to move my arrow keys on my keyboard. My left or my right controls the CTI. So I could move it frame by frame by frame by frame. So I could say, you know what, here I am right here on my actual keyframe. I'm going to hold down command and click on my left arrows and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on the 5th frame prior to that moment happening, I'm going to click on, or I could create another keyframe or just make this very blurry. Now I kind of can't see what's going on. That's okay. What I can do, instead of doing anything yet, I'm going to now bring the visibility of that layer over just a little bit more. Well, that kind of throws it off. It's like, wow, I can see it now, but that's not where it hits. It hits here. That's okay. Let's change up that blur. Okay, the word's gone. This is where it's going to start being blurry, but this is actually where it comes in on the hit of the audio being synced. All right, so that's how that works. Okay, now if I want even more, not a problem. Now instead of, I can actually move the CTI over using my keyboard command. I could, once again, command, use my arrow keys. Well, with my keyframe selected, I could hold on option and use my arrow keys. and move it over more. So I could individually move it over with my arrow keys and holding down Option, not Command, but Option. Command and arrows control the CTI. Option and the arrows control the keyframes. This is going to be very helpful for you. And also, if you noticed, if I bring this over here, I'm going to have to move this over. Well, we already learned how to do that. Option, open bracket, brings my layer over now. I can see that visibility there. And now it just extends it over a little bit more. All right, let's do the same for its. And let's do the same thing. So here we are. I'm just going to get rid of this for now. I'm just going to hide that for now, just to make things a little bit easier for myself. And I'm going to animate once again. I'm going to do another blur here for it. Great. And remember, here is the beginning of it. So let me set a keyframe at least for that. Sorry, I'm on the wrong one here. There, that's where I want it to be. I was on the wrong layer. There I am. And I'm just going to set a range selector. I'm going to set a blur here. Keyframe. That's where it comes in. Great. I'm going to move it over using my Command 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say for now. And I'm going to also Option, Open to make it visible so I can see what's going on at that point. I'm going to make it very blurry. Great. And I'm just going to, let's play it out. All right, now let's do the same thing for Add. So I'm going to bring that down. I'm going to open this up to animate and blur. And let's continue going here. Let's try this one out. So I'm going to bring it right here to the beginning of A, and I'm going to put the stopwatch on. I'm going to hold Command and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, left arrow key over. And I'm also going to Option and open bracket to bring it back to the CTI. So now it starts, it's visible there. I'm going to bring my blur up. And there we go. Not bad. Looks pretty good. Now I could easy ease that, but it's a little too quick and it might not work really well, so I'm not even going to worry about it. But what I can do is I'm going to click on these 3 layers. I'm going to press U. And what U will show me is just these stopwatches, just the things that are being animated. So I can kind of play around with, you know what, this one extended quite a bit. So I'm actually going to select these ones. And I'm going to select this one here. I'm going to hold on Option, 1, 2, 3, maybe bring it over a little bit. And I'm just going to line this up manually. I'm going to do the same one, Option, left arrow key, 1, 2, 3, bring it over a little bit. So now I can really extend out the blur if I want to. And I can make it even longer if I wanted. I could really bring these over. But for now, I think that looks pretty good, and I can always change it anytime I want. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to continue on here. So now what else can I do? Let me actually try some tracking. I'm going to add some tracking to this. So I'm going to twirl this back up and twirl this down, and let's add some tracking. So now I have some tracking. So at this point is where I want it to be proper. Let's see what we can do here. I'm not actually going to click on my stopwatch yet. That's fine. I'm going to click on my stopwatch now. That's where I want it to be. And when I come here, I'm going to really bring it out. Let's see how that animates in. Can't really tell because it's blurry, but it is a little something. It kind of shows a little bit. I'm going to keep it. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to do it for here as well. So I'll start with down here, tracking, and I'll do the same thing. I'm just going to add my where I want it to start, and I'm going to add my tracking to be exactly as is, nothing changes. I'm going to bring it over to the other keyframe, and I'm just going to expand it, and that's it. And it does the same thing. So I have my animation set up there. I could add more animation to this later, but you know what? I'm totally fine with that. So I'm just going to select these, press U. One more time to close it. U again, one more time to close it. And there we go. Now what I want to do, I'm going to roll over bittersweet. So let's do something here. So I did a range selector. So I am asking you to do a few different types of animation here. I'm asking you to do a range selector, a stroke reveal, a 3D space, a few different things here that we can try out here. So let me now actually do a track matte. Okay, so I could mask or track matte. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to show both because I want you to be aware of all the great things that are available to you. So what I can do is I'm going to add a mask on one and a track on another, track matte, just to show you what you are capable of doing. But you know, maybe you just want to do a matte, maybe you just want to do a mask. It's entirely up to you. So I'm going to start with bitter. So bitter, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to make them appear either way. However it works, I'm going to make the mask or matte move. So let's start with bitter. So with bitter, I'm going to have that, and I'm going to show that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a mask to it. Well, how do I add a mask? A few different ways. You go to layer, new, mask, and new mask. And what it's going to do is just going to make a mask around the whole thing, which is fine. Another way to make a mask is if I have the layer selected, I can just click a shape tool and click and drag, and we can see that the cursor is showing me it's about to make a mask. It has the square and the circle in there on the cursor. I'm about to make a mask. Another way to make a mask is to click the pen tool. Once again, the pen tool also has the square and circle together showing the mask. I could do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go to layer, mask, new mask, and what it does, it makes a mask around the whole thing just like that. Perfect. And I could also see on bitter is my mask, and mask shows up here, down here. Twirl it down. I see mask one. If I could put multiple masks on one layer, mask one, there we go. I'm going to play around with the mask path. Now I know that the mask path, once again, I want it to show here. I want everything to be seen here. Great. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say mask path is going to be set here. So my stopwatch is there. This is where bitter is going to show up. So prior to that, I'm going to go move my, hold down command and bring my arrows back. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm going to show my visibility there. How do I do that? Option, open bracket, or I could just manually brought it back. And now my mask path at this point, what I wanted to do, I kind of wanted to go somewhere else. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click and drag it, and maybe I'll bring it down here. Okay, or bring it up here, I should say. There it is. Now if I animate that, it shows up. So the mask is moving, but not the word. The word just stayed there, but the mask was not showing it, and then all of a sudden it's saying, yeah, let's show it. So there's my animation. For a mask, I can manipulate a mask path, which looks like the word is animating, but really it's just a mask that was not showing it, and now it's showing it. Once again, I'm going to bring this back a little bit just to give it a little bit more time to come in. So I'm going to select that keyframe, hold down Option, and I'm going to move it with my left arrow. I'm going to bring it back quite a bit because I kind of want it to show up and really give it some presence. So I'm also going to bring this back as well, which I could have also used Option and open bracket. So now let's play this out again. Okay, and it kind of does a very linear way. So here I could do some kind of play with the easy ease. So I could press F9 or just right click keyframe assistant, easy ease, and let's see if that does anything for me. A little bit, it's slowed down, so let me go back and select those as well. Graph editor, and I'm going to go make sure I'm on my speed graph, and I'm just going to click on these and kind of really give it a slow in. Or actually, you know what, maybe I'm just going to bring this back here. I'm going to bring this back, but I want this to come really slow out. Let's see how that works. That's not too bad, I don't mind that at all, but maybe I will give it a little extra. See how that works. Cool, I like it. So, and once again, I could always fine tune it. I'm happy with that. So I did a little bit of a mask. Now let's do a matte. Well, they're very similar, and I like working with mattes as well, but masks are pretty cool. So now I'm on Sweet. Let's look at Sweet. So I'm going to make a track matte. How do we do that? Well, number one, what I want to do is I need to make a shape that covers Sweet. So I'm going to click on my rectangle. Now I don't want it to be a mask, so I have to click off of the layers. So I'm just going to click and drag, and I see that the star is next to my cursor, meaning I'm about to make a shape. That's great. So I'm just going to click and drag. It does not matter the color, and there I go. I'm just going to make it like that. Great. So what I can do now with this is make it a track matte. So how do we do that? Okay, well, number one, this needs to be on top of the word I want it to be a track matte for. So I'm going to bring it over top of Sweet, which is where that's the matte, because now the way it works is the shape layer is going to be a matte, or I like to consider it a mask for the word Sweet. So it's going to show it or hide it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this track matte. And once again, I do have to mention this, my apologies. If you're not seeing parent link or track matte or any of those mode, you can click on here and it's going to toggle between your switches and your modes. So it just shows, it doesn't show my modes and it just shows the parent link, or I can click on that. Once again, if you still don't see it, you can right click anytime, columns, modes, and it'll show you the modes, which happens to be track matte mode and track matte. So here I am with my suite. I'm going to go to the track matte and say, okay, track matte with the layer above. I want you to be the alpha matte to the layer above. So what it's going to do now, it's going to, this visibility is going to have a relationship with this layer below it. So as long as this is at 100%, I will be able to see anything that's inside of it, which happens to be the word suite. Okay, let's label this properly. So let's just call this suite alpha matte. So now I know that this is the alpha matte for the word suite, and that helps me out. It helps me understand a little bit more. And I should also start color coordinating a little bit too, which I'll do in just a little bit. So I know that the word suite is going to be the alpha matte to this top layer, which happens to be that rectangle. So what I could do now, I'm going to animate the matte. So I'm going to bring this down, and I know that at this point is where I want that matte to be. So I'm going to do a transform. I'm going to do a position transform. So there's my position, and that's where I want it to be. I'm going to bring it back. I'm just going to bring this back a little bit. I could have used my keyboard shortcut, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to do it manually, which is totally fine. And I'm just going to move the position. I'm going to bring it in from the side. So let's do that. I'm going to play with the X, and I'm just going to move it over here. Okay, so now when I bring it in, it's going to show up. It should show up, but what happened there? Okay, I see what happened there. See, my shape layer showed up the whole time, but I don't want that. I want it to just be here, and I need to bring this over too. So number one, let's bring my track matte, the matte here, to show up here. So option, and I'm going to option, open bracket. So now the matte will only show up here. I'm also have to bring over my visibility of my actual word suite. It can't just show up here. I want it to show up the whole time. So I'm just going to click and drag and bring it over here. There I go. So now let's see how this works. All right, it just appears in. It comes in very slow. It comes in very fast. But that shape layer, or the matte now, is kind of coming in. Once again, let's do a little bit of work here. F9, graph editor. Let's really bring this out. You know what? I'm going to bring it out even more, which actually extends the distance, which is going to be hopefully a little bit slower. But I also need to bring these over as well, which I believe I could bring both at the same time. If I select both at the same time, I could bring both at the same time. So that's still pretty quick. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go even longer. Let's really play with this and bring it over and see how the timing works. Okay, that works. Because even the suite could kind of come in a little bit later. Or actually a little bit faster. No, a little bit later. Either way, I can totally play around with this. Let's continue on here. Good. So I've done a mask, I've done a matte, some pretty cool stuff there. So the next thing I want to do is a little bit of a stroke reveal. I'm not going to do it on Symphony. I want Symphony to do kind of a different thing. So I'm going to do it on I'll do it on Life. So let's go to Life, and I could do something different with as well. Maybe I'll do a little bit of a 3D situation. So let's go to Life. And I click on Life, and I see it appears right there. Perfect. Okay, so what do I want to do? I want to do a stroke reveal on this one. So I'm going to do that. And how do I do a stroke reveal? I'm going to click on the word Life, and I'm going to add some pen tools. I'm going to follow the brushwork. Okay, I'm going to follow the brushwork. I'm going to use a bit of an effect later too. So what I need to do, I have the layer selected, and I'm just going to have, now I know it's because it's selected, I click on my pen tool, and all of a sudden the mask shows up, and I'm just going to click and click. And what I've did, I've created a mask, but it's just a path, one path. It's not a complete shape. I do not want to create a complete shape. I'm going to press Command and click. I still have my pen tool selected, but now the line, it's independent. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Click, click, hold down Shift. I'm going to hold on Command and get rid of that. I'm going to do this one here. I'm going to start from up top, Command, click, and I'm going to click and drag, create that line there, maybe a little bit more there, and hold on Shift, click, there we go, and I'm going to Command click to kill that, and I'm going to bring this one here, great, Command click to get rid of that, and I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go, let's go here, let's go here to here, Command click, then I'm going to go here to here. Now I don't want to close it. I just want to come close to it. So when that's perfect right about there, great. So what I want to do now, I'm going to select all my masks on just this layer, select them all. There's 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to go to my effects panel. If you don't see the effects panel, effects and presets, once again, window, or you could actually go to your effect panel and do it here, but I'm just going to click in here and click on the word. I'm going to search for stroke, and that's what I want. I want generate stroke. So I could double click on it here, or I can click and drag and bring it over top of the word life where all my masks are. All my masks are selected, and here's what it's asking. Okay, what do you want to apply this to? I want to apply it to all the masks. Great. Okay, what I want to do, I want to increase the size of my brush size. I want them to cover the words. All right, so I'm just slowly bringing it up, make sure they're covered. Now, if I go too far, that's okay. If I come back a little bit, I just want to make sure they're covered, and you'll be able to see what happens when you play around with them. But for now, that's pretty good. I could play around with the brush hardness and say I want it to be very hard, so I could really play with how that brush size is going to work. Right about there. Let's see how that works. And I could always bring these back and play around with these if I have to. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to animate it. But I could actually now, not only do I have to work in the effects control area, and remember, project is always there. We didn't lose that. But the effects control panel is also here. I can actually just go down to here, effects. Anything you do up here, you could do down here. But sometimes the panel is visually a little bit better up there. But when I animate something, I want to do it down here because I have control over the timeline. So I'm going to do a start. So at this point, here I want it to more or less end, quite frankly. I'm going to click here, and at this point, but the first thing I need to do is my paint style. I want to reveal original image. So I want to reveal original image. So that's what I want it to be at this point. I want this to be what I can see. I can see the word life. So I'm going to do a start. I'm going to do my keyframe here. So I'm going to click on that stopwatch. Okay, there it is. I want it to be seen at that point, but I'm going to back it up a little bit. And I'm also going to make the visibility of that layer so I can see it there too. And now at this point, I want to make it 100%. At this point, I don't want to see it. So let's see if I start to bring it in. Now it's animating it from the back, which is kind of cool too, but I don't want it to. I want it to animate it this way. And I always have a little bit of a tough time with this. So I'm going to say this is still 100 at this. This is still 0% at this point. And if I bring it back, this is 100 at this point. And it goes backwards. So let me do a little time reverse and see what happens. I'm going to click on those, right click. I'm going to do a keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. Let's see what happens. No, it went the other way. Okay. I'm going to undo that. Not what I wanted. Let's do the opposite. Let's do an end. So I'm going to get rid of these. And I'm going to do it here with an end. Let's see how this works out. So my end, that's not what I want. I want my end to be 0. I'm going to bring it back a little bit more. And I'm going to say now it's going to be 100% at this point. And I need the visibility up over here too. Now I know I'm bringing it back a little bit. Same thing, that's okay. I usually have this issue here for some reason, but that's all right. So what I'm going to do, this usually fixes it. I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to bring this back here, but I want the start to be here. I want to be visible, and I want the start at this point to be 0. And that fixes it. Okay, so now what happened was that I was able to move it and make it work. But now life is not lined up. And that's okay. Let's line it up now. And I can kind of choose where I want that. Do I want life to be, as he's saying it? Do I want it to finish here when he's kind of in the middle of the word, or right when he finishes saying life that it fully shows up? It's entirely up to me how I want it to hit. I can go even slower. I can, once again, easy ease it. But I'm fine with that. And you saw how this kind of showed up here. It's kind of, this showed up. That's because this one showed up first, so I could always lower the brushwork, the brush size, so that doesn't happen. But once again, it's not the end of the world, but I can play with it. Let's just see what happens. I'm going to bring down the brush size and see what happens there. So that works, but let's see if it messes with anything else. Yeah, it doesn't look so good. It's not revealing it quite well. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit just so we can see it. Okay, right about there. Let's see how that goes. Still a bit of an issue, but we could always play around with that a little bit more. Either way, this is what I'm looking for. So I did a stroke reveal. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now, you know what? Let's do a little bit of a 3D effect on this, on the word that's. I'm really going overboard on this one verse. I definitely want you to play around with all these different things throughout your verses and choruses, like all the things you want to do. But right now, I just want to kind of show you all the different things you can do just with a few of these words here. So let's look at that. So what am I going to do with that? Well, number one, let's bring this back here. I'm going to do a transform, but I want to make it 3D. So I'll click on that. I'm going to make it 3D because now what I want to do, I want it to work in 3D space. So let's make sure, let's get to the word that's. So it's visible, and there it is. So what I'm going to do here, now that it's 3D, I can play with its X, Y, and now Z axis, but I'm probably going to play with its X axis, and it's at the actually bottom, which is exactly where I want it to be. If I want to, I can actually move it around, but sorry, not that part. I want to move the anchor point, but I don't really want to move the anchor point. But if I were to move the anchor point, I could, but not what I actually want to do. Either way, it's at the bottom. That's good. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to play around right here. I know that this is where it hits, so I'm going to click on which orientation do I want. Do I want to play with this one here? Yes, that's the one. Can I play with this one here? Sure, I could do it that way, or maybe it reveals that way. But I'm going to click on this one. So the orientation is good right here. That's great. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to hold on Command, my arrow keys to the left. Bring it back just a bit. Let's see where it can show up, because maybe where life shows up, maybe this should show up. Yeah, so life was just about to show up there. So now I'm going to make the orientation. First of all, I'm going to make it visible so I can bring it back over here. Then I'm also going to bring the orientation over. I said I was going to play with the x-axis, so now it's going to go this way. It's kind of going to disappear, then it's just going to appear from there. So that's it. So let's see what happens. There's my animation. That's it. Done. Once again, if I want to give it a little extra, F9. I can see if that easy eases in a little bit better. Not too bad. And that's it. I'm kind of happy with that. Just the way that works. Awesome, awesome. So that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with that. So what have I done? I've added a mask, I've added a matte, I've added a stroke reveal, I did a range selector, I've added some 3D space work. So now I'm just going to move on and play around with layer styles. So layer styles are pretty cool. Just like we've seen in Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, they all have layer styles, but Photoshop obviously does them really, really well. I'm going to apply it to Symphony. So what can I do with Symphony? Okay. So I did bring it to the top because I want the actual word to sit over top of all these other words because it's a very important word, different color, a kind of different typeface. So what I want to do with this, let me see what we can add a layer style. So let's go to layer and layer styles, and let's do an outer glow. Let's see how this works for us. Cool. So already it's there. The good thing about this is I could animate any layer style I want. So if I click on my layer style, which shows up here, I'm going to click on outer glow, and there's my outer glow. Now there's a lot of different options here, and I'm actually, quite frankly, I'm pretty happy with the color of it. Let's see how we do with it. So I'm happy with the color, and I know that Symphony shows up here. Now the thing about this, maybe I wanted to ease into the Symphony. I just wanted to kind of come in a little bit slowly. So at this point, there is no outer glow. So I'm going to actually play with the opacity. So my opacity at this point is going to be 0. Great. and then I'm going to slowly bring it up. So maybe right about here I can start growing it. So I'm going to grow it up to a full 100%. So at this point is right where I want to play with the actual outer glow. How do I want it to look? Okay, let's play around. Let's play around with the spread. How do I want the spread to look? Maybe not. How about the size? Let's play with the size. Yeah, cool. That looks pretty cool. It's going to be really pretty intense. So let's bring down the opacity a little bit right about here. And remember, all this information is being recorded by this keyframe. So anything that's happening right now, I'm moving around, is being recorded. Well, sorry, the opacity is being recorded. Whatever's happening, whatever I'm changing here, these stopwatches aren't being selected, so I'm not animating those. I'm just playing around with how I want my end outer glow to look. So let's play around with the range. Okay, not too much. The size a little bit more. Now I'm kind of losing visibility there a little bit. So maybe I do need to play around with the color after all. So what's the best way to kind of play around with that color? Maybe even something as simple as that. So I can still get that in there. The contrast is still pretty good. Right about here. I could play around with this all day long. I don't want to do that. So this is going to be my end result. It's going to start off with nothing and it's going to slowly grow. And it stays. And if I wanted to, I could have it grow even more after this point. So I'm happy with it right there, and maybe it stays for a little bit. So I'm going to create another one here, just another keyframe that does nothing. It's just going to remember the same information. And then maybe here it grows even more. As in I'm bringing up the opacity of it. That's kind of cool how it switched up to the contrast. So let's see what that does. And then it grows even more. And switches. Great. So happy with that. That looks good. The overall is very nice. I've done a bunch of different things here. It's looking pretty good. My layer style, I've added some, let's play around with some motion blur. So what did we have? Actually some motion. Well, we had bitter. Bitter was a little bit of motion. So let's add some motion blur there, see if it does anything for us. So I'm just going to click on that. My main motion blur is going to be on, and I'm going to add some motion blur to my bitter and maybe potentially to my sweet as well. Let's see if that works, because it wasn't this that moved, it was the actual track mat that moved. So let's see what happens if I can notice anything with bitter. Not too much, but if you do a position, you could add some motion blur and you're definitely going to see some good motion. Right now, didn't get too much out of those ones. I think mainly because the mask is what is actually moving. So I don't think I could apply motion blur just to the mask. It would have to apply to the whole layer. And the mat itself, once again, added blur to it, but didn't really see too much happen there because that was the thing that was actually being animated. Either way, motion blur can definitely help you out as well to create a little bit more smoothness in your position animations. Now, I'm going to add a little bit of a texture. Let's add a texture on top because I'm kind of done here with my verse, but you're obviously going to do this with more words, and depending on, like I said, your audio might change up a little bit. So I'm going to go back to my project and I'm going to add in a texture. Let's just bring in whatever texture, this texture here, just going to drag it right on top, and there's my texture right there. Okay, there's a texture. Oh, a little overwhelming. That's okay, not a problem. I'm going to shrink it down. I could shrink it down manually, but I could also use my transform options here and shrink it down and bring it right down, right to the center. There I go. I scale it down that way. I'm not animating it, I'm just kind of showing it. Now, what can I do with that? Well, maybe I could play around with the blending mode. How do I want this to look? Now, I'm going to hold down, I'm going to just look at darken. Okay, darken looks pretty cool. A little too much. So maybe what I should do is I'm going to actually do an option here where I can hold down shift and use the minus and plus keys and actually go through all of the different modes. So right now I'm on darken. I'm going to hold down shift and minus and it's going to go through the modes for me and kind of showing me which ones might work best for me, which ones might not. And as I go through them, like some of these are turning out pretty cool, pretty interesting. And once again, if it's too much, I could always play around with the opacity as well if I needed to. So I'm kind of just seeing how I want this texture to overlay everything, because the overlay, this one is on top of everything. So I'm just scrolling through. You know what, even that one's fine. I'm kind of happy with add. Let me go back to darken and see what that did. Let me play with the opacity. If there's a way to kind of give it some grit. All right. Now, once again, if I don't want this to affect my words, I can just bring this over top of the video, and it's just affecting the video. If I want it to kind of affect my words, I bring it over top of everything, and now that texture is over top of everything, which is totally fine, and I'm happy with that. Okay, now that I've done this, this is looking pretty good, and let's play it out one more time. All right, so this is more or less everything I wanted to show you about some of the things that you might want to help set you up, but now I'm going to render it out. But with rendering it out, I have to assume I'm finished, I'm done, I'm happy, and I'm going to open up Media Encoder to help me do that. Now, we've done quite a few animations. I definitely need to see 3 types of transform animations and a little bit more. After this, I'm going to show some more advanced features you might want to add to this, but at least I want to get you through this part just to show you how to set it up and kind of get it ready and then animate and play around. So now let's go to assume we're done, we're happy with it. I'm going to go to composition and I'm going to add to Media Encoder render queue, and let's see what we could do when we get into Media Encoder. All right, so now Media Encoder's opened up and it has populated what I've made in After Effects. It shows right here, lyric video. I guess I spelled that wrong. Either way, it doesn't matter. What I want to do, I already see it's H.264. If it isn't by default, you can click on that, H.264. Match source bitrate. Let's take a quick look at that. That's what I want it to be, but I'm going to open that up. All right, here we have it. We're going to have H.264, match it. Any comments? I'm going to keep my audio and keep my video. Great, look at my video. I could see everything. It's matched exactly what I want. Render at maximum depth. And I'm also going to use maximum render quality. I could also look at the audio. If there's something I wanted to look at the audio in terms of a sample rate, if I wanted to be higher or if it wasn't particularly high for some reason, I could play around with that. The bit rate, obviously I can make it higher, but I'm going to keep it at the sample rate that I was given. And that's it. I'm just going to say okay. Now, where do I want to save it? We know where I want to save it. I want to save it in my organized folder. So I'm going to click on that and it's going to open up. Where do I want to save it? Well, it happens to be on my desktop. My organized folder happens to be here. I'm going to put it under final and let's name it properly. All right, it's going to be an MP4, which is great. I'm going to save it. Now it's not done yet. That's all I have to do is click on this green arrow and it's going to go. Now, once again, this could be very long depending on what you did with your video, the kind of animations and all that, but we'll see how this goes. All right, now that it's done, it gives me the green check mark. Say go ahead. I'm going to double check my lyric video and I can see, yep, there it is, done. And I'm just going to quickly give it a open in VLC. Looks great. Now, obviously, it's going to stop there. I should have cut it off earlier. There's much more to be done, but I just wanted to show you at least one particular verse and exactly more or less how to do that. So much more to do, so I'll show you some more advanced features as we go. Okay, now that we've done kind of the big part of it and just getting you started and how to set it up, I'm going to show you some advanced features that you might want to choose to use throughout the whole thing, or just pick spots where you might want to put it in. So let's start with the audio. I mentioned at the beginning that the audio actually can be faded in, so let's actually look at fading this in. So right now my audio, and I'm going to have to look at my audio panel here. Once again, window, audio, and you could find that and you could see what's going on there. I'm just going to play around with fading it in. So how do we do that? So right now it starts off right away. Okay, so let's find a spot where I want it to be, where it fades in slowly. So let's go right about here and let's try it out. I'm going to keep a stopwatch there. So I'm going to, at the top here, I'm just going to bring it down. So I'm going to bring it down here. Okay, so now I know that I can play with that here. or here, and let's see what that does, because I could also bring down the decibels here. So we see that, oh, okay, great. It really goes to nothing. So let's see even what that does. Let's do that again, a little laggy. Let's go to a quarter, see if that helps out at all. Okay, so that was a pretty long fade in, but let's or a short fade in. Let's make it longer. So I'm just extending where I want it to, the original audio to be, and how it fades in. Let's see what happens there. All right, not too bad. At least it gives us some type of fade, and you could definitely play around with that a little bit more. Maybe I will actually bring this up just a little bit smoother there, which is kind of nice. So we could have a little bit of a fade in, which is pretty cool. And you could obviously fade it out near the end, because once again, you might not end the song right at the end of the song. It's going to end maybe midway through the song or a little bit more, and you might want to fade it out, which could, instead of it just being, you know, totally cut off. So we could do that too. But we're going to leave that alone for now. So we did a little bit of a fade. Now what I want to do is, you know what, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to the song. So I'm going to show right at this spot, while this is happening, before the first words come in, I'm going to show the name of the artist and the name of the song. So let's do that. But first, you know what I'm going to do? Cheat a little bit. I'm just going to grab my bitter and my sweet and my symphony. And I'm just going to grab bitter, sweet, and symphony. And I'm just going to duplicate those, Command D. And I'm going to bring them up to the top. So there I go. Great. And now I noticed that these ones still have an alpha on them, which I didn't want. So I'm getting rid of that track mat. So now it's just Bittersweet Symphony on its own, which is great. And I'm going to bring it over here. And these three tracks now, I want them to be at the beginning. So I'm going to have those three selected, Option, open bracket. Now that's where it is. And I'm probably going to end them maybe around here. I could always change it. Option, close bracket. And now that's where they are. That's where they appear. But you see this texture. Yeah, texture's over top of the whole thing. That's great. Do I want all these things, certain layers, to be over the top? Yeah, you could have them extend or start to certain times. Maybe I want the texture to come in later. I could opacity and bring it in later. I could obviously play with the transform of it. But you know what, I'll have the texture over top of the whole thing, which is totally fine. So here I go. I have this bittersweet. Oh, what happened there? Let's see. There's my bitter. Okay, it's there. Normal, none. Great. Let's take a look at everything. Yep. All right, no issue. Why it's, oh, I see why it's not, because my mask was there. So let's get rid of that mask. So I'm just going to click on that, get rid of that. My mask is gone, and now it's there again. So that was the mask from before. So there it is. There's my title. That's great. And you know, I'm going to add one more little bit of information. My favorite band. Let's bring in, no, not symphony. Let's duplicate this, bring it on top, and I'm just going to bring that down, and just going to say the verb. I just double click that, and now I can play around with that. I will bring down the scale. And I'll just tuck it in maybe over here somewhere. And there I go. Nothing special, just kind of hang it out. There we are. Looks good. Okay, that's it. This is my setup. Now, what do I want to do with this? Okay, well, let's take a look. Number one, what I mentioned before, what we should probably do is, you know, color everything that we want to have, so organize ourselves a little bit more. So let's say all of these are going to be red. That's great. My texture, maybe I do want it to be a little bit different, and I want it to be on top of everything, so I'm going to put it there. And now this is my title part. I'm going to say, let's change all those to yellow, let's say. And even my video and my audio could all be the same color. That's fine, but at least it gives me a little bit more organization, because I'm going to show you something else you could do later on that might be really beneficial for you. So what can I do here? Well, there's a couple advanced features I want to show you. Number one is the transition. So what can we do with the transition here? So we can do multiple transitions. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do something very, very simple. I'm just going to fade from black and fade into what we see here. So I'm just going to create a new layer, and this is just going to be a solid layer, new solid. Now I could easily just make a rectangle shape layer. I'm not going to. I just want to teach you about solids as well. 1920 by 1080, so it's going to be the comp size anyways. I'm going to make it black, which it already is. I'm just going to press OK, and there's my solid layer. Now the solid layer goes all the way across, which I don't want. I probably want it to stop right about here, because I'm going to fade it in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold Option. I'm going to have my layer selected, hold on Option, close bracket, and now it's going to end right there, so it doesn't go any further. So what can I do with this? Well, we know we can play with the opacity, a very simple transition. And we're just going to do that. It's going to fade in, say right about here. Let's see how this works. So my opacity, my initial opacity from this point is going to be here. Let's just say it's going to be 100% opacity. Then from this point on, it's going to slowly fade to nothing. So let's bring that opacity down to 0, and that's kind of it. Let's see what it does. That's it. Very simple transition. Hopefully that helps you out. You could fade to white, fade to black, fade in, fade out, whatever you want to do. But at least it gives me a little bit of a nice little transition to start. I could obviously extend that if I really want to. All right, but you know, whatever we want to do. So I'm just going to bring that back there. Great. Now, what else can we do here? Well, let's do another wipe. I'm going to do another transition because I'm in the middle of transitions here. Let's take a look at a wipe. So I'm going to do the same thing, but now I'm going to do it where we're going to add another solid, and I should probably actually name this. I'm going to call this black fade, or I could even just say, you know what, it's black. I know it's black. I'm just going to fade in. Cool. Now I'm going to do another one, but this one's going to do a bit of, I'm going to add an effect to it, a wipe effect, and you're going to see what it does. So right about here, same thing. I'm going to add another solid layer, new solid, and you know, I'm going to keep it black. I could do any color I want. I could always change it later. So if I don't like this color that is black, I could always go back to layer, solid settings, and I could change the color to red or to whatever I want. Actually, that's kind of interesting right there because I still get a bit of that texture, which is nice. So, you know, I'm going to keep that. So there I go. But where I want this to be, I want it to be over here because I'm going to wipe from one verse to another verse, just the words. So I'm going to start my, I have that layer selected. I'm going to wipe it. I'm going to start here. So option and open bracket, and I'm going to stop it right about here. Option, close bracket, but we could always play around with this. Not a big deal. And what I'm going to call this, I'm going to call this wipe just, and then I can say, you know, verse 1 wipe or whatever you want to call it. So what can I do here? Right now it's just a solid rectangle, nothing special. Great. I'm going to go to my effects panel. I'm going to type in wipe. Let me do that again, wipe, and then I'm going to look at this one, linear wipe. There's so many different wipes you could choose from, transition wipes. I'm just a radial wipe, anything. I'm just going to choose this linear wipe just to show what you could do with it. I'm going to click and drag. I could bring it over top of the layer. I can bring it over top of on the timeline or the layer panel itself, and that's it. Shows up, good to go. I'm going to twirl it down, take a look at it, and I'm going to now, oh, did I put it over top of the texture? I did, my apologies. I want it over top of wipe. So click and drag over top of wipe. There we go. And there I am. So right away, it already sets me up with some keyframes. Great. Let's click, take a look, twirl down the effects, twirl down linear wipe, and I see it right there. There's some linear effects. There's 100%. And let's just scroll through, see what happens. So I scroll through. Oh, it wipes in. Awesome. Okay, not bad. So I'm just going to extend it fully so I can fully see everything there. So right at this point, what's going to happen? Let's see. It's going to wipe away. Great. Okay, let's see if we can kind of fine tune that. It's going to wipe to the next verse, let's just say, or the chorus or whatever it is. So at this point, it's 100%. So, and then it's going to come in, and it's going to go down to 0%. So let's bring that in a little bit. And I'm going to add another keyframe. I'm just going to do another 100% keyframe. I'm going to copy this keyframe, copy. And wherever I paste it, wherever the CTI is where the keyframe is going to get pasted. Command V. So I just duplicated that. So now the wipe is going to go like this. It's kind of going to go in, go away, then come back, and then bring back maybe to the next, like I said, the next set of words or whatever you want to do. So here's a quick, simple wipe. If I want to add some, obviously, keyframe to that, some easy ease, F9, and let's see if it does a little extra. There we go. That was kind of interesting, right? So it did a full all the way wipe to a full 0%, which is all the way. And then once again, even at this point, let's kind of go here with my effects controls, or even my effects controls here. I could add a little bit of feather if I want to add some feather, so I don't want it to be super harsh. I can do that, but in this situation, I do want it. I could change the wipe angle. I could say, no, you know what? I want it to be at 0%. I want it to kind of fade in this way. Okay, well, let's do that. So now it's going to fade in this way. So let's play that. So whatever you want to do, there's a lot of great options here. With a simple effect, a simple solid layer, we could add in a very nice wipe to get us from one verse to another, or however you want to do this. So a nice little wipe, a fade in, and a wipe transition, which is pretty cool. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to play around with something called parent. And what I want here is I'm going to actually bring these in. I'm going to use a track mat, but I'm also going to make a line and I'm going to parent it to the track mat. And you're going to see what's going to happen here. It's going to be pretty interesting. I just want to show you parent a little bit more. I showed you parent earlier with moving things around, but now I want to show you parent how we can animate parent as well. So let me explain that. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to make a track mat, and let's just say I'm going to make a track mat for the word symphony and just it coming in. And what I'll do is I'm going to go down to symphony, the new symphony here, this one right here. Yep. So what I want to do now is I want to actually make a track mat for the word verve, and I'm going to actually parent something to it so it animates with it. We've talked about parent a little bit before, but now I want to go a little bit further and actually animate with it. So with my with nothing selected, I'm going to select my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to click and drag, and I see that I'm about to just make a shape layer, not a mask, nothing like that. I'm just going to click over top of the word verve and make kind of a little rectangle there that just covers it. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to make sure that my shape layer is above the word that I want it to track mat to. So I want the verve, so I'm going to click on track mat to apply to the layer above it to be an alpha mat. Okay, so the visibility of this, the opacity of this is going to pick up from the verve. So let's see how this works out. So I'm going to animate the shape layer. So let's take a look and do that. So I'm just going to, and then once again, it doesn't matter what the color the initial shape layer was, because it shuts off as soon as you make it the below layer, any type of alpha mat or luma mat or anything like that, it's going to change it. So you could always turn it back on, but that defeats the purpose. So I'm going to do a little bit of a position change. So what's going to happen here? Let's say this is not going to show up until a little bit later. Let's just say right about here. So I'm going to keep my position here, and let's move it back a little bit and say I want this to move out. Let's go in from here. Cool. So now it's going to disappear at this point, and it's just going to kind of come in. Now it's going to come in fast because there's very little separation between the two. Cool. Now let's play around with this a little bit, because I want to add that parent part of it. So let's see here. So once again, it's going to go from there to there. It's going to slowly come in. Cool. Now I'm going to go down back to quarter. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another shape. But what I want the shape to do, I want it to parent to this animation that's already happening here. So let me name this properly. This is going to be verve alpha mat. I want to parent it. Now, once again, I already have an animation set up. That's all I want to do is I want to parent another object to just follow that animation. That's it, very simply. So I'm going to have nothing selected. I'm going to make another layer here. Just something very small like this. Good. What I should do is make sure I could see the word, so that this layer, I'm just going to call this parent. This is going to be the parent of it. Where did you go? You disappeared. Let me do that again. Nothing selected. Actually, it's kind of good that that happened, so I'm just going to make a shape like that I know covers the full top and bottom of those letters, the H and the T, obviously the big ones. I'm going to press enter. I'm going to call this the parent, as in this is the thing that's going to parent. You can name it whatever you want, and I'm just going to bring it. I'm going to lock that texture, make sure it doesn't interfere with anything I'm doing. And you know what, let me change the color of this fill to something else. Let's make it that really nice color we have here, actually. Cool, or close to anyways. All right, so then I have this object here. That's great. And I'm going to bring this over to a point where I'm going to bring it over top of the thing I want it to parent to. It doesn't have to be, but it's nice that it's all connected together. And I know that this verve mat right here, okay, I'm going to make the parent. I'm just going to bring, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of cleaning up my layers here so nothing interferes too much. I'm going to make them a little bit easier to look at in my layer panel. And same with my parent. I'm just cleaning those up. Option open bracket, option close bracket. Okay, so what's going to happen is this is going to come in, and this rectangle that I just made is going to show up. It's going to parent the track mat, and then it's just going to disappear. So let's try this out. So what I'm going to do at this point is where it actually starts. So where is that track mat? I'm going to bring it over here. Okay, so it's going to flow from here. So I'm going to bring this back a little bit. And with that, I'm also going to bring the position back further. Maybe over here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this and bring it over here too. And what it's going to do, I'm going to parent it now to the track mat. Well, how do we do that? Well, I'm just going to say this is going to parent to this. So this shape is going to parent to this shape, which you can see kind of highlighted over there. So I'm just going to go to my parent and say I'm going to use the pick whip, but I could use it down here. I'm going to say I want to parent to Verve Alpha Mat, but I'm just going to use the pick whip, and I'm going to say parent to this. So parent this thing to this animation that's already happening, and we can see what happens automatically. Oh, did a little glitch there. It's just going to kind of come in this way and kind of almost like look like it's revealing it for us. Okay, now at this point I do need to move this a little bit more. Oh, something happened there. I didn't want that. I'm going to get this animation here. I'm going to move this, and I'm also going to move my animation a little bit. The X, I need to go a little bit further because that parent needs to make, there we go. That makes a little bit more sense there. There we go. So I parented the shape to the track mat. Oh, I see what happened there. When I added that extra keyframe, that kind of works too, actually, which is nice. Oh, and an extra one showed up there. Okay, I'm not snapping to them. Here's a little trick too. If you hold down Shift as you scrub over, it'll snap to individual keyframes. So if I'm holding down Shift, it's going to snap to that keyframe. Hold on Shift, it's going to snap to that keyframe. So this one is fine. This one, I want it to kind of come in from further out. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to move that position even further. There we go. And once again, it's being parented with this, with the parent. So whatever I do with this automatically works too. So it's going to move with it. So there we go. So now it's going to come in like that. It's going to look pretty cool. So that's it. What I can do even at this point now, even though it's parented, I can still manipulate this separately. So what I'll do is do something like this. I'm going to bring down the anchor point to the bottom here. And I'm just going to do something very simple. At this point here, let's just say it went through, and a little bit less, I'm going to kind of do a scale and get rid of that part of it. Where are we here? Transform. And at this point, I'm going to say yes, from here, that's good. And then at this point, I want you to scale the opposite and just kind of disappear right about there. Great. So now it's going to kind of come in, and then it's going to clear, and then it's going to kind of disappear that way. Now I could kind of lengthen that out a little bit just to kind of give it a little bit more presence. That's all. Okay, that's it. So let's take a look at that. So the track mat comes in, and it looks like the rectangle, the extra rectangle came in, is kind of placing it in there. But really, this little extra rectangle is just kind of following along the animation of this by using the parent. Nice and easy. So if you have something that's already happening, a cool animation, you just want something to follow along with it, just parent it to that, create a new object, parent it, and it's going to just follow doing the animation that the other object is doing already, which is pretty cool. Another thing I wanted to kind of show you here is something fun too. It's called Trim Path. And Trim Path is another option, another effect here. But what I have to do first is just make a simple line. Click here, and I'm going to click here. So I just made a line. Let's add a stroke to it. I'm going to get rid of the fill, no fill. And I'll say okay. And I'm going to say add a bit of a line here. Let's just make it white for now. Actually, I do love this color that I've chosen here. So I'm going to probably choose this color here. And let's just do something fun with it. There we go. Let me go to that line. So I know this is, I'm going to call this Trim Path. Okay. And see, now you see I'm getting a little out of control with my layers. I definitely need to organize myself, but I like that I'm at least labeling the things that I need to label, which always helps out. So now what I can do is actually create a trim path. So what I'm going to do with this line here, let me fix it up just a little bit more. Go to my contents, go to my line, the shape one, my stroke, and you know what, I'll bring down the stroke width just a little bit. So I'm just going to create something very simple here that you can kind of play around with and do anything you want with. It's pretty cool. And then from there, with my contents, I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to trim paths. And that's kind of it. Now I can go to my trim path one and do a start and end. Now this is all it is. I'm just going to kind of scrub this, and you see what it does. It kind of makes the line or takes the line away. So it's a quick, simple animation where I'm actually going to make sure that it doesn't go too far. I'm going to cut it off here, option, close bracket, so it doesn't go all the way across. And maybe what I'll do is it'll show up, maybe once that comes in, I'll do a little kind of come in right there. So it's going to start at nothing. It's going to come in to something, and then maybe I'll have it leave again at this point. Okay, so something as simple as that, trim path. You play with line, any path, any line, and you can kind of make it do something, which is really, really cool. You can make it appear, disappear, make it follow something, which is kind of interesting. So just to show you a little bit of trim path. So I have my trim path set up. I could play around with it a number of different ways, but that's kind of one way to play around with it, just to show you a little bit of trim path. Next, what I want to show is something that you might come across is playing with comps. So we have this kind of large situation happening here, and as you play more and more with all your verses and all this is going to pile up, and this is going to add up, and things are going to get a little unorganized and things like that. So there's something we can do that'll make our life a lot easier. And number one, obviously, you know, click on nothing, press U, and it just shows your keyframes. Press U again, and it collapses everything. Okay, cool. So I see a few things going on here. I see my verse. I see something that wipe I had. I see this texture that I had. I see a lot going on here. Okay. Well, as I mentioned, you're only going to have more verses and more verses and more verses. And let me show you exactly what I mean and how we could actually make things a little bit easier for ourselves. All right, so here I've opened up a full video that I did, lyric video I did for this same song. And what do we have here? Let's take a look. We have a lot going on here. So, you know, a lot of verses, a lot of chorus, and this is getting a little crazy now. I did my best to color coordinate. I did pretty good. I have a lot of background. I have my main audio here, which I put my markers on, which I should have put them at the top, or I could always move my audio at the top and help me out. But either way, here's my intro, here's my first verse, second verse, third verse, fourth verse with all my changes, first chorus, second chorus. Okay, there's a lot happening here, and it can be done this way, which is totally fine. However, it's a bit of an easier way to do that, and that is using comps or pre-composing. So what I can do potentially is actually select the layers that I want to put in its own composition, or as I mentioned before, with compositions, it's kind of like grouping a layer. So I just want these layers to be grouped together. Okay, well, we can't group layers in After Effects, but what we can do is make another separate composition, or in this case, pre-compose. Something's already made, I'm going to pre-compose it and make it its own composition. Well, how do we do that? Very simply, we select the layers that we want to have in their own grouped layer, or what we consider a composition, or it's even very similar to a few other options. In Photoshop, we also have something called Smart Objects, where we kind of put all these layers into one layer, and it's a smart object. So it's similar to that. It's similar to a group layer, but it's also similar to the idea of isolation mode in Illustrator, where you could double click on any object and it takes you to grays everything else out, and you could only work on that specific object. Well, that's kind of what this is all about. So how do we do this? I'm going to have this, I'm going to right click, and I can click on pre-compose. Now it's also under layer, pre-compose, or shift command C. So let's do that. Let's right click and pre-compose. All right, and it's going to ask me a few things. Oh, number one, what are we going to call it? So this was verse 1. So let's actually say verse 1. And it's going to give me a couple of options, but this option is grayed out because what it's saying right here, move all the attributes into the new composition. Use this option to place the currently selected layers together into a new intermediate composition. Like, yes, that's exactly what I want. I want to take all this, all the things that are happening, all the animations, everything, and put it into its own composition. Adjust composition duration. I'm going to leave it as is. Open new composition, not yet. I'm just going to say okay. And look what happens. It all shrinks down to one composition. So we know it's a composition because that's the icon for composition. Also, I can go into my project panel and I see a new composition showed up called verse 1. There it is. It's in my comps folder. Perfect. And that's it. Now, did all those layers disappear? No, of course not. If I want to access them and go back into it and kind of play around with them, that's all I have to do is double click on the comp and it shows up. Not only does it show up here, it shows up here. So I see verse 1. That's the composition I'm in. And look, all my layers are there. Everything's the same. The time duration is the same. The size of the composition is the same. My layers are all in the same position. Everything's perfect. Well, then you might ask yourself, well, wait a second. I have this new composition, but how do I line it? What if I change something here and I move it accidentally and it's not lined up to the audio anymore? Because anything you change here, well, you don't even have to save it. Anything you change in this composition will automatically be added to your main composition. So anything changed here in verse 1 will go in and change here on this main one here as well. Okay, well, what if I wanted to do something interesting to this particular one? Well, and it messes up with the audio. Well, here's a simple quick tip. Take that audio, copy it, Command C, go into your new verse, and just paste it in. Well, there it is. Well, what happens now if I save this? I'm going to have two audio files. I'm going to have two audio files playing over top of each other. I don't want that. You're right, you don't. So we do something very simple here. We're just going to right click and make it a guide layer. So when I do that, I have this little hashtag or number sign, and what happens is it's only a guide, as in it won't show up or be audible back in my main comp where the actual audio layer is. It's only here as a guide. So it won't actually be audible for you to hear, which is great. But I can use it to help me create what I want to create here. There's my animation. If I change anything good, I don't even have to save it. I just have to save my overall project. And whatever changes I make will be made here. And now, of course, I can kind of go through it. There it is. There's my comp. And right there, you know what? I can cut it off at this point right here if I want to cut it off, which I can. I could say there, don't need it anymore. That's as far as the visibility goes for that. So pre-composing is a great way to really help you figure all this out. Let me show you what the final would look like. All right, this is the final. I have my initial beginning. Title, I have a verse 1 and I added a wipe. A verse 2, this is my verse 2 comp, added a wipe. A verse 3 comp, added a wipe. Verse 4, chorus 1. So now it's so much cleaner, but it's still the exact same animation that I had before, but now it's cleaned up into individual comps. If I want to go inside my chorus 1 and say play around with chorus 1, I can do that. I can go through my chorus 1 and just play with chorus 1. And my guide layer is here as well, so I can make any changes. Anything that's changed here will automatically be changed in the main composition. So you can have many smaller compositions and different compositions that have individual motion, graphics, and animations, and bring them into one main composition, which would really help you out in terms of organization and anything like that. So just wanted to talk about that and show you that as well. And any effects you want to add to your main comp or individual comps or anything can be added. So back to our main that we were working on here. So you know what? I want to add some more effects because I definitely want you to play around with more effects. We added some wipes. We added a few different effects here and there. But you know what? Let's continue on here. So even with this city, let's see what we can do with our first one here. So I have the first city that I can see that's visible. Let's add some effect to it. Let's go to, let's add effect, and let's go to, where are we here? Click on that and go to effect, and let's do a color correction. Let's just do a simple photo filter. Let's just see what we can do here with photo filters. So effects and presets, effects controls, sorry, here. I'm gonna click on a filter or a color. Let's see which ones we can add. Let's add a cyan and see what that does. Okay, it adds a nice little tint to it. And once again, that could be an effect, as in it doesn't have to be animated. It's just a simple effect. Now, if I want to animate it, I can. I could twirl it down and see my effect and say, you know, I want it to gradually turn into this photo filter, this particular cyan for some reason. So I can kind of say I want the density. Let's play around with the density and see what happens there. You know, there's a little bit of it. It's very subtle. And you could have a nice subtle one. It's entirely up to you. We could play around with the individual filters. Say it goes from a cyan. Let's see how this works, actually. Let's go from here. From the fade. Where's my fade? There it is. Let's say I go from this filter cyan. And it's going to go to, let's even just play around here. So it's going to go to orange. No, it just does a stop animation. It just quickly goes to that orange. So I can see how that animation kind of works in that particular way. I'm not going to play around with that too much. But once again, we're just playing around with a different type of animation here, and how much we want to see of it and how much we don't. So I could do that. I could do a density animation and click on my density there, and over here I want it to be far less. Okay, there we go. So I can go from kind of a sepia to add that color back to normal, which is really cool. So a lot of different kind of corrections, color corrections we can make. Obviously, a lot of different ways to play around noise and grain. If you want to stylize a certain way, a lot of different ones, transform a certain way, a lot of different blur and sharpen that you could play with and add different effects to just play around and add some more interest to your video. But remember, the most important part is syncing up your lyrics, your syllables, your words, your lines to the audio, making sure it's visible and readable. That's a very important part of it, obviously. And just having create a kind of feel to it that hopefully the audio and the words kind of create an emotion, potentially, a look, a style that makes sense to the audio and really helps, you know, they complement each other. That's a very important part of this. So I hope that helps, and I hope you create something amazing.